air power and how it affected World War II. Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941. A day that will live in infamy is a day that will never be forgotten by those who were there, those who have served, and those that learned about it in school. It was the day the U.S. entered World War II. The Pearl Harbor attack came unprovoked and the U.S. was unprepared. The devastation was inconceivable not only to the Pacific Fleet, but the loss of life could have been prevented. Radar was still in its early phase and the U.S. hadn't broken the Japanese naval code completely. With Japanese radio silence prior to the attack, the U.S. should have expected something to happen. No one did. Up until the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the U.S. tried to stay out of the war. Despite all efforts, the U.S. continually sent aid to Great Britain in the form of tanks, rations, guns, jeeps, 1-2 tracks, motorcycles, ammunition, and more. Nothing changed until the attack at Pearl Harbor. This attack not only brought America together as a nation, but put the war into perspective for so many. The war machine was in full production, ensuring the Allies had the upper hand to defeat such atrocities. The U.S. was now officially at war. Not only were U.S. forces fighting Japan in the Pacific, but also Italy and Germany in North Africa. U.S. pilots also requested and were transferred to aid Britain with their home defense against the Luftwaffe. The British were almost to their breaking point with constant bombardment of its coastline in London. The U.S. entering the war finally gave the British a chance to breathe. Over the next year or two from 1941-1943, the U.S. started to ship troops to Great Britain to build up for an upcoming invasion to thwart the Germans back to their own country and dissolve the Nazi regime. Hitler understood the consequences of declaring war against the U.S., but did it anyway. Little did he know, the U.S. was going to bring more than just another army to fight. The U.S. brought its warriors. Although Hitler decided to invade the USSR, his forces were spread too thin. Eisenhower and the top Allied leaders were watching and planning to end his reign of terror. The invasion was set for June 5, but due to inclement weather it was postponed until June 6. Seas were still high and the weather wasn't great, but the raid had begun and Germany was in for a fight. With wings. With naval bombardment and air cover, the invasion had begun. The Germans were ill-prepared for the force they had encountered. Not only was it a bigger force than anticipated, it was also heading toward Normandy, not Point du Hoc, where Allied intelligence had secretly used fake intel to catch the Germans off guard with bad intel. The German forces were scattered and on call to be redirected at a moment's notice. The only problem was, the Germans didn't know when or where the attack was going to come from. From battle to battle, the Allies provided air cover and keeping the Germans and Italians on their heels. The Allied air power gave the ground forces time and cover from German tanks, artillery, and ground forces trying to dig in defensively. This was a proven strategy from day one and would be the best way to keep pushing towards victory. Ground forces were thankful for the assistance from the air. Not only were key targets taken out, but due to the inaccuracy of carpet bombing, cities were leveled and casualties of civilians were on the rise. Once the Germans were pushed back into their own country, the Allied air forces had complete control of the air and all airspace. Relentless carpet bombing and strategic bombing raids were continuous. Air power provided a great advantage for all militaries involved in World War II campaigns. From the Japanese raid on Pearl Harbor to the Soviets pushing back the Eastern Front, air power was key to winning the war. Even to this day, if you dominate the air, you dominate the battlefield. There are many examples of this from World War II to present day. Air power is how the US and its allies control the battle and continue to prove that without it, you suffer more losses than expected. Even now with the Russia-Ukraine war, the air is the most important aspect of the battlefield.